The great hall of the crystalline palace shimmered under 1,000 lights. Princess Lyra sat perfectly still on her throne, her face showing nothing as she watched another prince parade before her. This was the 37th one in 37 days. Each one was worse than the last. This prince was tall, his skin golden like sunrise, and his armor caught every bit of light in the room. He carried a crystal box in his hands, holding it up high so everyone could see. "Your Highness," he said loudly, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "I bring you the fire diamonds of Arcturus. These jewels are worth more than entire star systems. Their value cannot be measured. Choose me as your consort, and the wealth of 3 galaxies will belong to you. My family controls the richest mines in the coalition. We have power beyond imagination." Lyra's fingers tightened slightly on the armrest of her throne. That was the only sign of her frustration. Her face remained calm, almost bored. She had heard this speech before. Different words, same meaning. They all brought wealth or power or armies. None of them understood what she actually needed. Her advisor, an elderly man named Torin, stepped forward. His voice was tired. He had said these same words 37 times now. "The royal test is simple," he announced to the gathered court. "You must demonstrate true guardianship. You must anticipate the needs of your future queen before those needs are spoken aloud. Show us you can truly care for another person." The Golden Prince frowned. He clearly had not expected this. He thought his diamonds would be enough. He stood there for a moment, confused, then launched into another speech. This time he talked about his strategic mind, his political connections, his family's ancient bloodline. He talked about himself for 10 full minutes. Lyra stopped listening after the first sentence. The hall was uncomfortably warm. 50 nobles stood watching, their personal energy shields humming softly, generating heat. The afternoon sun poured through the tall windows. Lyra felt sweat forming under her ceremonial robes, but she did not move. A princess did not fidget. A princess did not complain about discomfort. In the far corner of the hall, hidden in the shadows between 2 massive marble columns, someone noticed. James Miller had been working as a janitor in the palace for 6 months. He was human, which meant most of the aliens barely saw him at all. Humans were new to the Galactic Coalition. Most species thought they were primitive, good only for simple work like cleaning floors and fixing broken things. James had an engineering degree from one of Earth's best universities, but that meant nothing here. What mattered was the crushing debt his family owed for his mother's medical treatments. So he mopped floors in an alien palace and tried to become invisible. He was very good at being invisible. But being invisible meant he saw things others missed. He had been watching these tests for weeks now. He saw how the princes performed, how they preened and posed. He also saw the princess. Really saw her. He noticed how she held herself carefully, how her left hand occasionally pressed against her ribs, how she shifted her weight when she thought no one was watching. James had done his research. There had been an assassination attempt last year. The princess had been wounded. The injury had healed, but not completely. She was in pain, especially after sitting still for long periods. None of the princes had noticed. They were too busy talking about themselves. James quietly moved to the environmental control panel built into the wall. It was disguised as decorative stonework, but he had learned every system in this palace. His fingers moved quickly over the hidden controls. He dropped the temperature by 2 degrees. Not enough for anyone to really notice, just enough to make breathing easier, to reduce the oppressive heat. The Golden Prince finally finished his speech. Torin looked at Princess Lyra. She gave a small shake of her head. Another failure. The prince looked shocked. "But, the diamonds, my family's wealth?" "Thank you for your time," Lyra said politely. "You may go." The court slowly emptied. Nobles filed out, whispering to each other, already gossiping about who might try tomorrow. The Golden Prince left looking confused and angry. Servants began putting out the lights. Lyra remained seated. She always did this. She waited until the hall was completely empty before trying to stand. The pain was worse after sitting for hours, and she refused to let anyone see her struggle. James understood this. He finished adjusting the temperature controls and quietly moved toward the service exit. But first he stopped by the small preparation room where the palace kept supplies. He filled a cup with hot water and added powdered willow bark from Earth's medical supplies. His mother used to make this tea for her chronic pain. It helped at least a little. He walked silently to the princess's throne and placed the steaming cup on the small side table. He had written instructions in Coalition Standard on a small card. "For pain. Drink slowly. Human medicine, safe for your species." Then he picked up his cleaning supplies and disappeared into the shadows. 10 minutes later, when Lyra finally stood with a barely hidden grimace, she saw the tea. It was still hot, still steaming. She picked it up slowly, read the card, and looked around the empty hall. Someone had noticed. Someone had seen her pain and had helped, expecting nothing in return. For the first time in 37 days, Princess Lyra smiled. James Miller had not planned to become a ghost. But that was what he felt like most days, moving through the palace halls like he did not exist at all. When he walked past groups of nobles, they did not lower their voices. When he cleaned near important meetings, no one told him to leave. They simply did not see him. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Coalition. First contact had happened only 60 years ago. Most alien species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. To them, humans were children, barely capable of understanding the complex politics and ancient traditions that held the coalition together. Humans were useful for simple tasks. Manual labor. Basic maintenance. Nothing important. James had graduated top of his class with an engineering degree from MIT. He understood quantum mechanics and advanced propulsion systems. He could have worked for any of Earth's top research facilities. But none of that mattered when his mother got sick. The medical bills had crushed his family. His father sold everything they owned. His sister dropped out of school to work 2 jobs. It still was not enough. So James took the only job that paid enough to help. Janitor in an alien palace, light years from home. The pay was decent because no human wanted to be so far from Earth. The work was simple. His supervisors were kind, in the distant way people are kind to those they consider beneath them. He mopped floors made of crystal. He cleaned windows that looked out on alien gardens. He adjusted environmental controls and fixed broken equipment. And he became invisible. But invisible people see things that others miss. For 6 weeks, James had watched the royal tests. Every afternoon, another prince arrived with gifts and speeches and grand promises. Every afternoon, Princess Lyra sat on her throne and watched them perform. And every afternoon, another prince failed. James began to understand why. The princes never looked at her. Not really. They looked at her crown, at her throne, at the power she represented. But they did not see the person. They did not notice the careful way she moved. They did not see how she held her left side when she thought no one was watching. They did not catch the tightness around her eyes that spoke of hidden pain. James had done research in the palace databases. He had maintenance clearance, which gave him access to most systems. He learned about the assassination attempt 14 months ago. An energy blade, they said. It had nearly killed her. The royal doctors saved her life, but the wound never fully healed. There was nerve damage. Chronic pain. She took medication 3 times a day. None of the princes knew this. Or if they did not care. James started making small changes. When he knew a test would run long, he adjusted the temperature in the Great Hall. Cooler air made pain easier to bear. He modified the lighting controls, reducing the brightness by small amounts. Bright light made pain worse, he knew that from his mother. He even adjusted the acoustic dampeners, making the hall quieter so the echoing voices would not pound in the princess's head. Small things. Things no one would notice. Things that made her a little more comfortable. The tea had been a risk. He had crossed a line when he left it on her table. But he had seen her hands trembling that day. He recognized the signs. His mother's hands shook like that when the pain got too bad. So he made the tea and left it there, hoping he would not get fired. Day 43 was different. James was cleaning near the back of the hall during another test. Another prince, this one from some warrior species, was demonstrating his battle skills. He had brought weapons and was making them spin in the air, showing off. The crowd loved it. Everyone was watching the display. Except James. He was watching the princess. He saw her breathing change. It became shallow, quick. Her hand moved to her ribs, pressed there for just a second before she forced it back to the armrest. Her jaw clenched. Something was wrong. Her medication was failing. James was sure of it. He had seen this before with his mother. When pain medication wore off too soon, there were signs. The body gave warnings. James did not think. He just moved. He went to the environmental control panel first. He dropped the temperature 3 degrees. Cold helped numb pain. Then he went to the lighting controls and reduced the brightness to almost twilight levels. Someone complained, but the prince was so focused on his demonstration that he did not care. James adjusted the humidity next, making the air softer, easier to breathe. Finally, he modified the acoustic settings, dampening sound until the hall felt quieter, more peaceful. The princess's breathing steadied. Just a little. But it was enough. After the test ended and the court emptied, James did something he had never done before. He went to the medical supply room where they kept human medicines. The palace stocked them now because more humans were joining the coalition. He found a mild pain reliever, something his mother's doctor had recommended. It was safe for humans, and according to the database, it was safe for Valerian physiology too. He left it on the princess's private table in her rest chamber. He had maintenance access everywhere. He left clear instructions written in coalition standard: dosage, timing, possible side effects. He signed it simply, a friend. Then he returned to his cleaning cart and continued his work. He was just a janitor. She was a princess who would one day rule 1,000 worlds. He expected nothing from this. He did not want thanks or recognition. He just wanted to help someone who was suffering, the way he wished someone had been able to help his mother. James did not know that Princess Lyra had already asked her guards to find out who was leaving the tea. He did not know that she had noticed every environmental change, every small adjustment that made her days easier. He did not know that she was watching the corner where the human janitor worked, wondering about the invisible man who saw what no one else did. The 50th prince was the largest being James had ever seen. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body covered in armor that looked like it was made from starlight itself. Behind him, visible through the palace's main entrance, an entire army waited. Warships hovered in the sky above the city. Soldiers in perfect formation lined the streets. The prince did not bow when he entered. He strode into the great hall like he already owned it. His voice boomed off the walls, loud enough to make the crystal chandeliers shake. "Princess Lyra," he announced, "I am Prince Draven of the Iron Reaches. My family has ruled the outer systems for 10,000 years. Our military has never known defeat. Our enemies flee at the sound of our name." He gestured broadly toward the windows, toward his waiting army. "Choose me as your consort and your enemies will tremble. No one will dare threaten Valarath again. We will rule the coalition together and all will bow before us." The assembled court murmured with approval. This was impressive. This was power. Several council members nodded to each other. This match made political sense. The Iron Reaches were wealthy and strong. An alliance would benefit everyone. James was in his usual corner, nearly invisible in the shadows. He was working on an air filtration panel that had been making strange noises for 3 days. He had his tools spread out on a maintenance cloth, his attention focused on the mechanical problem in front of him. He barely heard the prince's speech. But he noticed when Princess Lyra suddenly stood up. Everyone stopped talking. This had never happened before. The princess always waited until the speeches were finished. She always let the princes complete their presentations before making her decision. Not this time. Lyra stepped down from her throne. Her advisors looked shocked. The court fell completely silent. Even Prince Draven stopped speaking, his mouth hanging open in surprise. The princess walked slowly across the great hall. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet. She walked past her throne. She walked past the assembled nobles who lined both sides of the room. She walked past Prince Draven and his grand promises and his waiting army. She walked straight toward the corner where James was working. James did not notice at first. He was focused on reconnecting a wire inside the filtration panel. It was delicate work. One wrong move and the whole system would shut down. Then he saw the shadow fall across his work. He looked up. Princess Lyra stood directly in front of him. She was looking down at him with an expression he could not read. Behind her, the entire court stared in confusion. Lyra raised her hand and pointed at James. Her voice was clear and steady. "You." James froze. The screwdriver in his hand stopped moving. His mind went blank. Had he done something wrong? Had he broken some rule he did not know about? Was he being fired? Arrested? "Me?" he managed to say. The court erupted into chaos. Voices rose from every direction, all talking at once. "What is happening? Is this some kind of joke? That's a human. That's a janitor." Torin, the elderly advisor, pushed through the crowd. His face was pale. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "that is a maintenance worker. A human. He is not a candidate for the test." "Yes," Lyra said calmly. She did not look away from James. "He is the only one who passed the test." James stood up slowly, still holding his screwdriver. He looked completely lost. What test?" "Your Highness, I don't understand. I was just fixing the air filter. I didn't mean to disturb anything. I can come back later if—" "The royal test," Lyra interrupted gently. "For 50 days, princes have come here trying to demonstrate true guardianship. For 50 days they have failed. They brought me gifts I did not need. They made promises I did not want. They talked about themselves and their power and their greatness. But not one of them saw me. She gestured around the hall. Every one of them was so focused on being impressive that they never noticed I was in pain. They never noticed I was uncomfortable. They never anticipated my needs. They failed the most basic requirement of guardianship, paying attention to the person you claim to care for. Lyra turned to face James directly. But you saw. You noticed everything. You adjusted the temperature when the hall was too warm. You dimmed the lights when they hurt my eyes. You changed the acoustics to reduce the echoes. You left me medicine when you saw my medication was failing. You helped me expecting nothing in return. You passed the test without even knowing you were taking it. The court exploded with objections. Prince Draven's face turned dark with anger. This is outrageous, he shouted. A human? They have only been in the coalition for 2 generations. They are primitives. They know nothing of ruling or power or... Then let him prove otherwise, Lyra said, cutting him off. Her voice was calm but firm. James Miller will undergo the traditional trials. He will face the same challenges any candidate must face. If he passes, the matter is settled according to our law. Does anyone dispute our law? No one spoke. The law was ancient and absolute. Lyra turned back to James. You will undergo 3 trials. Combat, diplomacy, and science. If you pass all 3, you will become my consort. Do you accept? James looked at his screwdriver, then at the princess, then at the hundreds of nobles staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to fury. He thought about his family back on Earth. He thought about his mother's medical bills. He thought about how he was just a janitor who had tried to help someone in pain. Your Highness, he said quietly, I'm not a warrior. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not a prince. I'm just a janitor who noticed you were hurting. Lyra smiled for the first time in 50 days. Her eyes were warm when she looked at him. Yes, James. That is exactly why you passed. The combat trial took place in the Grand Arena 3 days later. Thousands of spectators filled the seats, all wanting to see the human janitor fail. James stood in the center of the sand-covered floor, wearing simple protective gear. Across from him stood a Kronar warrior named Thax. Thax was 7 feet tall and built like a mountain. His species was bred for war. Their bones were twice as dense as human bones. Their muscles were like steel cables. They trained from birth to fight. Thax had won over 300 combat matches. He had never lost. He carried a plasma staff that crackled with blue energy. His armor covered his whole body except his face. When he looked at James, his expression was almost pitiful. This would be over in seconds. The signal sounded. Thax charged forward like a freight train. James did not try to meet him head-on. That would be suicide. Instead, he dove to the side at the last possible second. Thax's staff smashed into the ground where James had been standing, sending up a spray of sand. James rolled, came up running, and grabbed a handful of sand as he moved. When Thax turned to charge again, James threw the sand directly at the warrior's eyes. Thax roared and stumbled. The crowd booed. That's cheating, someone yelled. But it was not cheating. The rules said no weapons except what was provided. Sand was part of the arena. James was using his environment. Thax cleared his eyes and charged again, angry now. James ran toward one of the arena's support columns. At the last second he dropped and slid under Thax's legs. The warrior could not stop his momentum. He crashed into the stone column with tremendous force. His armor dented. He shook his head dazed. James did not give him time to recover. He grabbed Thax's plasma staff while the warrior was disoriented and used it to sweep Thax's legs out from under him. The big warrior fell hard. Before he could get up, James had the staff pressed against his throat. Yield, James said quietly. Thax stared at him for a long moment. Then he started laughing. It was a deep, booming laugh. I yield, he said. He looked up at James with something like respect. Humans don't fight fair. They fight to win. James helped him up. On Earth we have a saying. All's fair in love and war. We do what we must to survive. The crowd was silent. The human had won. The diplomatic trial came next. James sat at a large table surrounded by representatives from 50 different species. They all wore translation devices. They all looked skeptical. They gave him impossible scenarios. A trade dispute between 3 species with completely different values. A religious conflict that had lasted centuries. A resource shortage that affected 12 worlds. Problems with no good answers. Problems that had stumped professional diplomats. James had no training for this. He had never taken a diplomacy class. He had only his experience as a human, growing up on a world where hundreds of cultures and languages and beliefs somehow learn to live together. For the trade dispute, he suggested something simple. What if each species gets something they value even if it's not the same thing? Species A values honor, Species B values profit, Species C values tradition. Structure the deal so each one gets what matters to them, not what matters to you. The diplomats blinked. It was so simple. So obvious. Why had they not thought of it? For the religious conflict, James said, you can't change what people believe, but you can change how they act. Create shared goals. Give them reasons to work together. Common threats unite people faster than common beliefs. For the resource shortage, he suggested cooperation instead of competition. Pool your resources. Share the technology. What one species has in abundance, another needs. Trade. Help each other. You're stronger together. His answers were not elegant. They did not use fancy diplomatic language. But they were practical. They were based on empathy and understanding. They worked. One by one, the diplomats nodded. The human had passed. The scientific trial was the hardest. The coalition's best scientists presented him with a problem they had been trying to solve for 30 years. The long-range transportation gates used too much energy. The system was unstable. Ships sometimes disappeared. They needed a solution. James studied the technical specifications for hours. The scientists waited, expecting him to fail. This was beyond a janitor's knowledge. But James saw something they did not. They were trying to make the system perfect. They were trying to create a gate that worked flawlessly 100% of the time. What if, James said slowly, we don't try to make it perfect? What if we make it adaptable instead? The scientist frowned. Explain. On Earth, our internet works because it's fault-tolerant. If one route fails, the data finds another route. If one server goes down, others take over. The system isn't perfect, but it's reliable because it can adapt. Why not design the gates the same way? Multiple backup systems. Redundant pathways. If one gate fails, another activates. The energy gets distributed across the network instead of concentrated in one point. The head scientist stared at him. That's not elegant. No, James agreed. But it works. Sometimes good enough is better than perfect. They ran the calculations. The solution worked. It was not beautiful, but it was effective. The human had passed again. Between trials, James and Lyra spent hours talking. She taught him about coalition history, about the complex politics between species, about the ancient houses and their power struggles. He taught her about Earth, about humanity's journey from caves to starships, about resilience and adaptation. You see things differently than we do, Lyra observed one evening as they walked through the palace gardens. We had to, James replied. We didn't evolve in stable environments with clear rules. We evolved in chaos. Ice ages, floods, droughts, diseases. We learned to adapt or die. We learned to improvise, to find solutions where others see only obstacles. He paused. And maybe being a janitor helped too. When you're invisible, you see what others miss. You notice the small details that everyone else overlooks. Lyra stopped walking and turned to face him. Her eyes were warm in the fading light. You're not invisible to me, James. You never were. Retrike. The bonding ceremony was supposed to be the happiest day of Lyra's life. The great hall was decorated with flowers from 100 worlds. Thousands of guests filled the space, representing every major species in the coalition. Music played softly. Everything was perfect. Then the explosion started. The main doors blew inward. Armed rebels rushed into the hall, their weapons raised. Guests screamed and ran. Security forces tried to respond, but the rebels were ready. They had planned this carefully. Within minutes, the rebels controlled the throne room. They had taken 30 hostages, including 5 council members. Their leader, a Valerian noble named Lord Castor, stood at the front of the room with a weapon pressed against Councillor Torin's head. This union is an insult to our traditions. Castor shouted. A human cannot rule Valorath. We demand the princess choose a proper consort or step down. Security forces surrounded the building. The head of security, Commander Vex, studied the tactical displays with a grim expression. We can breach from 3 points, he said. Fast assault, overwhelming force. We'll take casualties, but we'll win. What about the hostages? Lyra asked. Her voice was steady despite her fear. Vex hesitated. There will be losses. But the rebellion must be stopped. It's acceptable. Acceptable? James stared at him. You're talking about people's lives. I'm talking about the survival of the government, Vex replied coldly. Sometimes sacrifices must be made. James looked at the tactical display. He looked at the floor plans. He looked at the rebel positions. Then he turned to Lyra. I have an idea, he said quietly. But it won't look heroic. It won't be glorious. And I'll need you to trust me. Lyra met his eyes. Tell me. Give me 30 minutes, James said. Don't let them breach until I signal. Vex frowned. What are you planning? Something they won't expect, James said. He was already moving toward a maintenance door that most people did not even know existed. 6 months of working as a janitor had given James something no warrior possessed. He knew every maintenance corridor in the palace. He knew every service passage, every ventilation shaft, every hidden panel. He knew the access codes for systems that most people forgot existed. He had maps in his head that no one else had. While Commander Vex and his warriors planned their glorious assault, James disappeared into the walls of the palace itself. He moved quickly through passages designed for maintenance workers. These corridors ran behind the walls, under the floors, above the ceilings. They connected every room in the palace. No one guarded them because no one thought they mattered. James reached the first access panel and got to work. He connected his maintenance tablet to the palace's electromagnetic grid. The rebels had taken control of the main systems, but they had forgotten about the backup systems. The maintenance systems. James still had full access. He identified every weapon the rebels carried. Each one used energy cells. Each energy cell created an electromagnetic signature. James activated the palace's electromagnetic dampening field, tuning it specifically to those signatures. Within seconds, every rebel weapon stopped working. They would not fire. They would not even turn on. The rebels noticed immediately. Castor shouted at his people to check their weapons. Confusion spread through their ranks. James moved to the next access point. He connected to the palace's communication network. The rebels were using encrypted channels to coordinate. James did not try to break the encryption. He simply rerouted all their signals. Every message they sent now went to a dead channel. They could not talk to each other anymore. Panic began to show on the rebels' faces. Their weapons were dead. Their communications were down. They did not understand what was happening. James reached the ventilation controls. This was the dangerous part. He accessed the medical database and found a formula for a non-lethal sedative gas. It was designed for emergency medical situations. It was safe for all coalition species. It would make people unconscious within 60 seconds. He modified the ventilation system to deliver the gas only to the throne room. Then he sent a message to Commander Vex. Tell your people to put on breathing masks. 1 minute. Vex did not understand, but he trusted James. He ordered his forces to don emergency breathing equipment immediately. James activated the ventilation system. The sedative gas flowed silently into the throne room through vents that the rebels had never noticed. They were too focused on the hostages, on the doors, on waiting for the assault they knew was coming. One by one the rebels began to sway. Their eyes closed. They dropped their useless weapons and collapsed to the floor. Castor was the last to fall, still holding Torin, both of them sliding down together as unconsciousness took them. The hostages, who had been breathing the same air, also fell asleep. But they were safe. They were unharmed. Commander Vex and his forces breached the doors exactly 60 seconds later. They found a room full of sleeping people and no resistance. The rebellion was over. James emerged from a maintenance hatch in the corner of the room. He was covered in dust. His clothes were dirty. He looked completely unremarkable. Crisis over, he said simply. The warriors stared at him. Commander Vex looked embarrassed. The council members, once they woke up, looked stunned. You didn't fight them, one counselor said slowly. No, James agreed. I didn't need to. Fighting isn't always the answer. Sometimes you just need to think differently. The bonding ceremony was completed 2 days later without further incident. The council, seeing what James had accomplished, formally approved the union. Lord Castor and his rebels were imprisoned. No one had died. No one was even injured. 5 years passed. The human-Valorian alliance changed everything. Other species that had been considered lesser found new opportunities. Innovation flourished throughout the coalition. Old hierarchies began to soften. People started to see value in different perspectives, different approaches, different ways of thinking. James and Lyra ruled together, combining Valerian tradition with human creativity. Their children were being raised to see beyond status and birthright. One evening, James found his daughter Emma in the maintenance section of the palace. She was 7 years old and sitting on the floor with the head of the cleaning staff, learning how to calibrate environmental systems. "Dad," Emma said when she saw him, "why do you still help them? You're a prince now. You don't have to do this work." James knelt down beside his daughter. "I was a janitor before I was a prince," he said gently. "That job taught me something very important. Everyone sees the world from where they stand. Nobles see grand strategies and politics. Warriors see honor and glory. But the people who do the everyday work, the people who keep everything running, they see what actually needs to be done. They see the details everyone else misses." He smiled at her. "Greatness isn't about your position or your title. It's about paying attention to what everyone else overlooks. It's about noticing when someone needs help and helping them. That's what really matters." Emma thought about this seriously. Then she nodded and returned to her work, learning alongside the staff without any sense that she was different or better than them. Lyra joined James in the doorway watching their daughter. "She'll be a good queen someday." "She'll be a good person first," James replied. "That's more important." Above them, through the crystal ceiling, the stars of the coalition turned slowly in their ancient dance. And somewhere far away on Earth, a young human looked up at those same stars and dreamed of making a difference. Not through conquest or power or glory, but through simple acts of seeing and helping and caring for others. The human way.